Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual chamber breakfast. And I'm delighted that we're going to be illuminated with the wise words of Dave Millett, DRF consultants, and also Dave sits on our board. I'm just going to let everyone know that Dave, we're going to see a presentation. If the points you wish to, query or anything, can you put your little yellow electronic hand up, because we're not going to use the chat as such today. And if they're generic questions, can we ask them at the end, and again with your little yellow hand, please. And afterwards, you'll be lucky enough to be receiving the slides in a PDF format. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Dave now, and any questions, little yellow electronic hand up, and Ed will usher you in. Thank you.
Morning, everyone, and Ed will start sharing a slide. When someone first started the Zoom things, they said yellow hand, I kept seeing people going like that on the screen instead of actually using the electronic one. So as we adapt to the new world. So yes, good morning, everyone. Obviously, as the economy, well, it's forecast to grow by about 7.5% according to the latest figures. And businesses have been through different times over the past year. I was speaking to an artisan baker yesterday who said the last 12 months have been the best 12 months he's ever had. And obviously, if you were selling PPE equipment, it's probably been quite a good year for you as well. Obviously, those in perhaps other sectors, hospitality, travel, have had a very torrid time. But it is important. I think the world has changed. The way our customers consume our services, our products has changed. So it's now probably now more than ever to think about how am I going to plan, whether I'm reopening a business, whether I'm changing it, or whether I'm just continuing. So next slide, Ed, please. So what we're going to cover in the aim will be covering about 45 minutes to allow some time for questions, is some first bets. So where do you want to take your business? What are the ways you could potentially grow it, regrow it from there? And then moving into how might you structure that into a plan that you can, people think, oh, I'll write a business plan and I've done it and I've stuck it in a drawer and it's forgotten about because I've done it once. Now, a business plan is something you should be pulling out every 3 to 6 months to say, well, how is it going? What do I need to change? So it should become like a guide to your business. Next slide. So I want to start with one of the great sages of the business world, Lewis Carroll, which if you didn't know that. And I find businesses owners are often quite listed. The section where Alice meets the Cheshire Cat for the first time. And Alice says, well, which way should I go? And the cat says, well, where do you want to get to? And Alice says, well, I don't really care. Well, the cat says, well, it doesn't matter which way you go. And a lot of people approach their business like that, in the sense of they don't have an idea of where they want to get to. So often that means they just carry on. It's a bit like setting out on holiday without turning up at the airport, even allowing the time to get through all the check-ins these days, and not knowing where you're going to arrive to. So the whole point of the idea is to try and firstly think, what am I trying to achieve? Where do I want to get to? And then how do I plan to achieve that? So if we go to the next slide, please. And a lot of it is, one of the things, if you want a bit of background reading, I would recommend this article. It was published by the Harvard Business Journal about 15 years ago, but it's available online, called Red Ocean, Blue Ocean. And the idea is people often think about their business in the same way. How do I get a little bit better than the competition, rather than rethinking it and thinking, how could I do it differently? So a classic example of large corporates would be Apple, who, they reinvented the mobile phone, and became a touch screen. And the big providers at the time, BlackBerry, Nokia, had great comment, that will never catch on. Well, who's still making phones today would be the answer for that. It could be a good friend of mine, in modern times, used before COVID, used to do piano lessons. Obviously, she would go to people's houses, teach the piano, and that's what happened. And then obviously lockdown came, she couldn't do that. And one of her clients said, well, could you carry on teaching me online? Which was something she'd never considered, because normally piano is about showing people where to put their fingers on the keys and all the rest of it. And she's flourished in lockdown. She's gone online. She's now getting customers from across the UK rather than within about 15 minutes drive. And she's just in the process of setting up a YouTube subscription based channel that can provide her with a recurring income by posting up all the lessons that she creates and all the rest of it people can download and use in their own time. So she's rethought the way that she's delivering the services. I think one of my favorite examples, and it's in the article, was about a cement company. And I would challenge anyone to come up with a commodity, something that's more commodity than cement. And this guy used to deliver cement. And in the building industry, you normally order your cement quite a bit in advance because you're not quite sure because of lead times. And obviously things change, rain, you're not quite ready. This guy came up with the idea of providing cement on demand because he sold roughly the same amount every day. So all he did, he went to, instead of taking orders in advance, he just filled up his cement mixers and sent them out on the streets with GPS trackers. And as people called in, he would get cement to them, almost within the hour. As a result, he was able to charge a premium of about 30% because the builders liked it because they could just order it there and then have the exact quantity they wanted, and rather than planning ahead. And within about 8 months, he'd captured 85% of the cement market in his town. He is still selling cement, but he'd just gone about it in a totally different way. So one of the things I would encourage people is to think about the businesses. A lot of people have had to do that. Another example, friend of mine who was ran cocktail classes, how to mix cocktails, which again, obviously couldn't do in the pandemic. He changed his business and was moved into selling cocktail kits that people could do at home over Zoom parties and all the rest. In fact, my daughter used one of them. She had 6 friends when it was her birthday in lockdown. They all got a cocktail kit and had a party virtually. So again, he's changed his business to reflect the circumstances. Next slide, please. So in terms of, we all want to grow our businesses. Some have got to rebuild our businesses. So there's some fundamental things to think about in growing is what is it you want to sell? Is it a product? Is it a service? Who's going to buy it? And that may have changed over the past year. And the timescales and the way they consume that service has changed. There may be new people wanting new things. One of the things that grew in lockdown was puppies and pets. Demand for dogs grew dramatically from people who perhaps hadn't thought about buying dogs before. So if you've got a business at the moment and you've always perhaps targeted the same groups of people, have they changed? Have the market dynamics have been thrown on their head? So who should you be targeting your services of? And it's also generally a better recommendation. A lot of people try and sell loads of different things. It can be better to, do I focus on a specific product? I'm going to sell product A rather than try and sell product A to H. Or is it a group of people that share similarities so I can market more easily? And then obviously, where am I going to find the leads, the demand? How do I create demand? And we'll touch on that a bit later. I think one of the very important things to understand with any product or service is what is the client journey when buying it? Obviously, if you're just in the mood for a snack, obviously when places are open, it's I'm hungry, what's nearby? So the buying journey is relatively short, might be as much as 5 or little as 5 or 10 minutes. Something else, perhaps like buying a car, might be 6 or 9 months, that buying journey from when your customer thinks, yeah, I fancy a new car, and starts doing some research. Understanding that buying journey is very important for where you target your marketing, your lead capture, lead generation, and all the rest of it. In fact, the car market is another one that's changed. You've seen companies like Cinch and there are other companies available that have regenerated the way you buy a car. We'll deliver it to your home. You can try it for 2 weeks. If you don't like it, send it back. Trying to disrupt the market. And then what is the best? Is it online? Is it direct selling? Is it through third parties? So understanding all of those are key to developing how you're going to grow the business. Next slide. And basically, when it comes down to it, there are only 4 ways to grow a business. You either sell more to existing customers of the same thing. So that's like things like loyalty, your Waterstones, and you've got your loyalty card, buy 10 books and we'll give you 1 free or give you a discount. So that's just encouraging more people to consume more of what you sell. Top right is, how do I keep doing what I'm doing but get new customers? I mentioned the piano teacher. By going online, she now effectively can sell to the world. And I've certainly seen other people. I'm learning Spanish and at the moment, and one of the YouTube channels I subscribe to is run by a lady who lives in Colombia. Yes, and she's got about 120,000 subscribers to her Learn Spanish YouTube channel. So it's very easy for her. She's going to keep doing the same thing, teaching Spanish, and she's looking to pick up customers worldwide. The alternative approach is, and this is particularly true if you've got a loyal customer base, using the example of Apple again. How do I sell new products to that existing base? And Apple have done that very well. You've got your Apple TV, you got your Apple Watch, all the rest of it. Obviously, I'm an anti-Apple person. I'd never buy Apple at all. But it's a Marmite company. A lot of people love them and will continue to consume things. So if you've got a very loyal base, they're talking to you, they trust you, can you introduce other products or services that complement what you already do? And then the hardest one, and is not really appropriate for small businesses, is go into a totally different market. Usually that's only achievable when you've got a very strong brand. So Virgin would be the classic example. Virgin started, they started as a record maker. Tubular Bells back in about 1973, and I'm old enough to remember that, was the first album that Richard Branson did. He then got fed up of giving people like W.H. Smith a share of the sale price, so created Virgin Records. Okay, so that's a bit logical. But then obviously, as nowadays, you've got Virgin Banks, you've got Virgin Fitness, Virgin Airlines, there's been Virgin Coke. He's just used the brand to leverage. The other important thing is it's very difficult to execute more than one of those strategies at the same time. So one of the important things to think about when you're thinking about growing your business is which of the 3 ones that are mainly open to small businesses. Do I just try and sell more to my existing customers? Am I going to try and get new customers, or am I going to develop new products? You can do more over time, but it's much better about which is my initial focus strategy. Next slide. And I think the key thing when you're selling anything, I don't know how many people have seen the film Wolf on Wall Street, where at the end, the guy says to someone in the audience, "Sell me this pen." And the guy in the audience goes, "Oh, well, it's a very nice pen. It looks well made and all the rest of it." What he's doing is what so many people do, is they're talking about the features of the product or the service, not the benefit it brings. What problem does it solve for the customer? When the guy gives it to someone else and he says, "I need you to write something for me." "Oh, well, I haven't got a pen." "Let me sell you this pen." He's identified the problem and the need, and he's selling his product into it. So one of the important questions you can ask yourself about your business is, what problems or needs do I solve in my customers? And if you can understand that, then that's where you can target your marketing and your sales approach. The next slide, please. And I think the other thing within selling is, one of the things is to understand what stops people buying from you or buying that product. And all buyers for anything have certain risks they're worried about. Obviously, financial. What's it going to cost me? Will it, can I get it cheaper? Is it good value? So there's that financial understanding of what it costs me. You see the expensive jewelers, well, they don't have the price tags, and the old adage, if you have to ask what the price is, you can't afford it. Have you got the functional bit? Will it actually work? Will it let me down? Am I buying a known something from someone I've bought from before, therefore I'm fairly confident it's going to work, or am I trying something new that I don't know? The psychological, the fear factor, which has been a bit obviously going into shops. How do I make people comfortable coming into my shops? And that ties in the social, but also social people. Some people are worried about what people think of them if they own a certain brand or use certain services. And that, particularly with things like environmentalism, very strongly. I mean, Tesla announced today they're no longer going to use Bitcoin because of they're obviously selling an environmental product, an electrical car, and they had a big backlash when they said they were going to trade in Bitcoin. So they've had to change that they've bowed to social pressure in the way they sell it. And the physical, obviously, can I get hurt? Perhaps not appropriate if you're just going to pop in for a coffee, but if your service is offering bungee jumping or something like that, you've got to put people at certainty that they're going to be safe. So understanding the problem you're solving amongst your buyers and the concerns they may have before they actually purchase are a key barrier to actually growing your business. Next slide, please. And if you think about, I touched earlier about the journey the customers are on, and I've created the two slides elements here. One is someone you're selling face-to-face or over the phone, and the alternative, if you sell your products or service online. The journey is pretty much the same. i.e. that the buyer becomes aware of a need, or alternatively, they might arrive on the site. They'll start talking to you about their needs, or they might just search the site. They might ask for a proposal, which could be face-to-face, or how much does that cost? Oh, it's X. It's still a proposal. Online, you'd have a product list. If you're face-to-face, you'd get some feedback, or that's a bit expensive, or can it also do this? You have a conversation. Online, people perhaps reading interviews, they might be reading reviews about you, Trustpilot, things like that. And you end up with a final proposal. You might need to chat if you're online, and then you get the acceptance, it's put in the basket, delivery and pay. Understanding where you lose customers on those journeys is very important, because if your conversion rate is only 1 in 100, that means to grow your business, double it, you've got to find double the number of 100 more opportunities. Whereas it maybe you can actually grow your business by improving your conversion rate. Where am I losing people? Is it when I do the proposal? Is it, or if it's on the website, is it they can't find information? Things like Google Analytics which is free, very good for understanding time people spend on your website. Where do they abandon it? How many people abandon their baskets? Perhaps because you suddenly find out how much it's going to cost to deliver it. So understanding that customer journey and where you lose people is extremely important. Next slide, please. And as well as winning new customers, it's also about keeping the ones you got, or in the case of the pandemic, if you're perhaps reopening from having been closed to all, how do you get your old customers back? Vodafone announced a couple of weeks ago, they just suddenly realized actually the truth, it is much more expensive to keep acquiring new customers than retaining old ones. So how do you ensure that loyalty? Now that can backfire on you. I mean, Virgin, for example, upset a lot of people recently when they started offering new customers the same service that their existing customers were paying double for, effectively. So it's about £50 if you're an existing, but if you're a new customer, you can have it for £25. That doesn't encourage long-term loyalty in your existing ones. How easy do you make it for customers to contact you? And is it appropriate for your business? Is it via Twitter, social media? Is it via your website? Is it via phone? I, I'm, and that will reflect perhaps age. Obviously, my father, who's nearly 90, doesn't use the internet or anything like that. So when councils and people like that say, "Oh, you got to fill in this online form," and that's the only way you can consume the service, he's almost effectively being disenfranchised because he can't do that, because the only way he uses is the phone. And if you are using the phone, are you using the press one, press two, which some people can find interesting? I find a good example is, particularly if you employ people, call your own business. Try and contact your own business as a customer and find out how was it, because you can often learn a lot from that, and that might change the way you treat other customers. And obviously, what has been very important during the pandemic is keeping communication going with existing customers. Be it newsletters, be it courtesy calls, be it surveys. Particularly if you're reopening a business, getting the word back out that you've you're doing it. I mean, I think some of the things have been very good. Some of the venues I used to like going to see live music have been constantly in touch over the 12 months. This is what we're doing. This is when we hope to open. And now they are reopening. Now they're sort of starting saying, yeah, well, you've been a loyal customer of ours before, have half price off your first ticket, things like that, things to do that. But it's also an ongoing, as you get a customer, if they have the potential to rebuy from you or even refer someone to you, how are you leveraging that? And the next slide, please. So in terms of the the business plan, having decided is it can be for many people. Ed, if you can click about 4 or 5 times, it'll bring up the list of who's there. So business plan can be for many people. It could be, yes, just yourself. I want something to follow, to go through, to give me a guide that I can refer back to. It could be for investors. That could be people you want to loan you money. There are quite a few grants available at the moment, again, from the government, from councils, but they may want to see a plan for what you're going to spend the money on. Could be you're going to go to the bank for a loan. It's also for suppliers, particularly in now we're in is you might have had to suspend orders from a supplier in the in the lockdown. So if you're going back to them saying, yeah, I'm reopening, they might, well, how much are you going to order? Particularly if you want credit, because they want to get, do I gear up my business to meet the old demand? Do I start taking back on staff? There are lots of uncertainties. So by giving suppliers some surety, customers as well, we're back, this is what we're going to be doing. And obviously, if you're employing staff, you've got staff coming back off furlough potentially. What's the plan for them? Do they want confidence it's all going to be good going forward? The next slide, please. And I think if you're looking for a business plan, one key slide to perhaps remember is this. It's really about answering 8 key questions. What are you going to sell? To whom? What's the opportunity? This is part of a business plan is also something to use to validate your ideas. How big is the opportunity? I can remember running a business clinic in Wandsworth, and a business owner came in with an idea for their business, and we talked it through. And based on what they were doing, they were very niche, but we worked out they'd have to get probably something like 150% of the market to actually achieve their targets. It just isn't possible. And it's not just small businesses that happens. I was done for years. I was working down in Botswana for the Botswana Telecom Company, and they had done exactly the same thing. They, in their business plan, went back through numbers, and we worked out to hit their revenue target, they'd have to get 110% of the market in Botswana, which obviously they just weren't going to do. Understanding the competition. On one point, what are they doing now? Things are changing. Are they going to do something different that might overtake you, or change the way you behave, or give them an uncompetitive edge? How are you going to sell? Very important. the margin you're looking to make, and probably the number one reason why most businesses fail is because of poor cash flow. So what is the cash flow going to be for the business? And we'll talk about that a bit more. And I think the other thing that's very important, particularly in terms of using a business plan on an ongoing basis, is how do you know you're successful? As human beings, we're very good at retro justifying. Come New Year, how's the year been for? Oh, it was great. Well, yeah, and that's almost, and no one wants to admit they've had a bad year. But a lot of people run their businesses like that. Oh, yeah, we're doing okay, is often a phrase I hear. And my comment is, well, how do you know? What are the measures you're going to use? And they should built in your business plan that link to what you're trying to achieve. And we'll come back to those in a bit more detail later on. But those are the 8 things you should be asking yourself about your business when you sit down to write a plan. The next question, please. Next slide, rather. The other thing to think about before you start to put pen to paper on your plan, or start, perhaps that's old fashioned, start to use the keyboard, is that it's a classic one, the SWOT, but it is also about being realistic. What are the strengths? And strengths should be something that no one else could say, something that gives you a unique advantage over other people. Now, it could be, yeah, you've got a very loyal customer base and you never lose customers. Well, that's great. So how do I sell more to them? How do I get them to refer them for more business to me? So understanding those strengths is important because it's about how do you leverage it. Where are the opportunities? What's happening new? I mean, I was thinking went past a dog grooming van. I think there's probably a massive opportunity for those types of companies this year because the number of people that have bought dogs during lockdown is massive. And now those people are going to be going back to work. So they won't have the amount of time to perhaps look over the pets. They're perhaps going to need someone to do dog walking, dog sitting, all the rest of it. So what's changed in the market? Where are the new opportunities that you can go and exploit? Obviously, being realistic about what weaknesses, where are you weak, what could you do better? Because obviously the plan then is how do you address them? And what was it, Jeremy Clarkson used to say in Top Gear? What could possibly go wrong? What are the threats that could happen to the business? And then how would you deal with them if they occurred? Obviously, we might want to build in another wave of lockdown. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it may be a threat, or there might be more local lockdowns. How would you deal with that if that affected your business? The next slide, please. The other thing to think about, and it's important to understand, is what's happening to your market. And if you sell more than one product, where does it fit? So is the market you're in growing or declining? And that is absolutely a number of people that try and, in a declining market, it becomes very difficult, and usually the only strong will survive. So if all your products, you're selling to products that are declining, not just because of pandemic, because of perhaps of social trends. So good example would be less people are actually getting married these days. So if your sole service is positioned as a wedding photographer, the overall market for wedding photography is going down. So maybe you need to reposition yourself to do other activities. If you can, obviously it's better to look at markets that are growing. The dog grooming one might be an example, and then try and understand, well, where's my position in that? If I'm if I only sell locally, am I well thought of? If I got strong market share in a growing market, by definition you should be successful. I used to work in the call center market back in the 1990s when it really took off, and it was growing 70, 56. Everyone wanted a call center. I was fortunate to work for the number one supplier. We didn't have to sell anything at all because we were seen as the number one supplier and everyone wanted one, so they just beat a path to our doors. We were very fortunate. The thing, we hit a curve when Y2K came along in year 2000, and we'd got everyone to upgrade all their systems. We hit a curve because the market growth went into reverse. It's almost like slamming a car doing 80 miles an hour into reverse. And whilst we were still number one, the market was declining, and that caused us a lot of problems. Some markets go full circle. Vinyl records would be a good example. Declining to the point there was only one record making company in the UK. Vinyl's gone through a resurgence. They held on in there and have done very well. So understanding the dynamics of your market are really important. Is there growth? Are people wanting more of what you do? If there is, and you can ride that wave, that is a good place to be. Next slide, please. So this is, if you're looking, and if you go on the web and say what the contents of the business plan should be, there's 101, if not probably 101,000 different views of it. So this is just one suggestion. It's one I've used for large companies, small companies, and I think it does cover all the key areas you need to think about. People often also ask, how long should a business plan be? I would say for a small business, if you can't write it in 3 to 5 pages, you've probably gone into too much detail. Obviously, if you're going a large company, you'll need a bit more. But if you start writing 100, 200 pages, my comment would be, are you ever going to use it? It's got to be small enough that you can pull it out, check, oh yeah, that's what I said then, because that's what I thought. That's changed. Now let me update the plan to reflect those changes. So what we'll do now is just quickly go through each of those elements just to expand some of the things that I would expect to see in there. The one thing you may notice is a business plan is not like a book with the conclusion at the end. In a business plan, the conclusion comes at the beginning, the executive summary. And that's the reason is, particularly if you're going for investment, grants, anything like that, this is the bit to grab people's attention. You want them to read that and say, ah, okay, I understand this business. I will now read the detail. You can't reach the conclusion at the end and say, I've got a wonderful company. Will you give me some money? It's got to be bold and at the front. So the next slide, please. So what is that executive summary going to cover? It's really as simple as 6 paragraphs. What is it you sell? What are its advantages? What differentiates it from other people? You know, is it because it's the only one in the market? It's brand new? Is it you have wonderful feedback from your customers? Your Trustpilot rating is top, whatever it is, but something that shows what it is you do. So particularly someone that perhaps doesn't know your business, what does it do? What do it do? What's the market opportunity? To come back to that point about if you want someone to invest in them, they're probably not going to invest in a market that's declining. So you want to make them understand that there is growth there. And it could be a re-emergence growth after the pandemic. Obviously last year was bad, but everyone wants to do this. I mean, certainly, the economists are saying a lot of people have got money in their pockets burning a hole. Those who are fortunate enough to stay even in furlough and work from home, they've built up money that they didn't spend and therefore have the opportunity to spend it. Your management team. Now, if you're a sole business owner, it doesn't mean that you won't have help or external advice. And that's where you would put it in there. I can remember working with a dyslexic charity in Wandsworth, and it was just one lady who was also dyslexic, but she found out that a previous Wandsworth mayor had also been dyslexic and got her on board as an advisor, which gave her a lot of credibility in the local area that, oh, I've got, a former mayor of the borough, and also obviously gave her a lot of contacts. So it doesn't have to be formally employed by you, but it could be the people around you to give confidence to the people. If you've got a track record to date, great. If it's a brand new business venture, it might be, well, what have you done in the past? I know when I went out on my own for the first time, leaving corporate life to set up my first business, obviously I'd never run a business myself, but I was able to talk about some of the things I'd achieved in a corporate environment. The finance numbers, again, top level, profit, turnover, what's the growth rates? And the final one isn't optional, and then only needed, obviously, if you're going for loans or investment or angels or whatever, crowdfunding, is how much do you need, for how long, and what return will the investors get? So you can see probably in less than half a page, you can actually write the summary of your business plan. The next slide, please. So the detail, again, you don't need 200 business objectives, probably 4 or 5. What are the key things I need to achieve for this business to be successful? Because if you've got 100, you'll never measure them. If you've got 4 or 5, you've got something you can come back to. So it should be quantifiable or measurable. It's not to, oh, what, I want to grow the company. No, I want to grow the company by 10%, or, and they should have a time scales as the example there. And it may be your business is longer term. If it's, it's going to take doing research to develop a product that's going to take 4 or 5 years, fine, you can still have business plan, but then you should have some interim milestones. What am I going to achieve at every 6, 12 months? Something that, again, people can measure progress by. The next slide, please. I touched on the management team. If there's more than one of you, who's going to do what? It's very important to understand roles. Otherwise, people will gravitate to doing what they like rather than necessarily do it. If you've got background, the structure. If it is just you, one of the questions people may ask you is, well, how are you going to do everything? Because the key thing with any person that's running their own business is that you're usually the salesperson, you're the delivery person who provides the service or the product, makes the product, and does all the admin. That may work for a short time. Well, I know from when I set up my first business and you suddenly find you're working 80 hours a week, and when you actually analyze the time, very little of it is going on growing the business. It could be, and in the end, I went to being a virtual company. I outsourced everything. I outsourced the finance, the marketing, the admin, just so I could focus on winning customers and delivering the service. One of my KPIs, I used to track the average revenue I was earning. And after I grew to the point where I hired people, and I knew whenever my revenue started to plateau, perversely, that's when I had to hire people. Because what it meant was I was getting too involved in the day-to-day running of the business rather than growing it. And so that's an example of having a metric that I used to actually tell me to do something. So whenever the revenue, and then sure enough, I'd hire someone that when I went back out doing what I was better at doing, which is winning new customers, and the business grew again. And it could be you've got some of the loans, some of the schemes around there come with coaches and mentors to support us. That, again, give confidence to people that are investing in the business. You've got support around you. The next slide, please. Touched on earlier the products and the service, and you can't stress this too much. What makes your product, excuse me, different? A little test I would give everyone: sit down with a pen and say, write down 3 things that no one else can say about what you do. And it can't just be we offer great customer service, because everyone will claim that. Because if you understand the 2 or 3 things that really make you different, that can be leveraged through your marketing, when you meet people, everything. If you can really identify what makes you different. Again, we touched on before, what is it the customers gain? What problem do you solve? That benefit. Focus on selling benefit, not features. Is there a roadmap? Do you have a plan as to how the product or the service will evolve over time? It could be like, this is version 1, and in 6 months we'll release version 2, which has got these extra features or widgets, or we'll be able to add these new services. It's also worth being honest about the weaknesses, because that could tie in with the point above. We recognize, day one, we can only do this, but we think that's enough to get us a foothold, and then we'll address those weaknesses over time. If you're blind to the weaknesses within your products and services, you will come a cropper in the long term. The next one, please. We've touched on this before. Yeah, what's the market? What's the size? Is it growing? The recent trends, has COVID had a negative or a positive impact? And there are quite a few businesses, as I said earlier, that have done really well. In fact, the artisan baker I was speaking to said you were actually now the boon we got through the pandemic has now eased off, and we're back to about normal levels of trading beforehand. So, some markets will boom. Everyone want to go probably to the pub when they reopen formally indoors. Certainly, they've been crowded outdoors. But I actually saw, I was in the pub on Sunday, and I actually saw the pub turning away people because they hadn't made a booking. But what I thought was they're missing an opportunity. They had a booking system at their disposal, fingertips there. So it must turn away about 10, 15 couples in about an hour and a half. Not once did they offer them, can I book you in for another time? So they'd missed that sales opportunity. But in terms of size of the market, if there's some references to support your data, great. Google's a wonderful resource these days of, showing trends and market figures. There's lots of reports out there. And the next slide, please. Important to understand your competitors, look at their websites, critique them. What's their price? Doesn't mean you've got to be cheaper, but you need to understand if you're going to ask people to pay more than your competitors, you need to justify why. How do they sell their products? Can you learn from that? Can you steal an idea? How did they respond in the past year? Is there something you can steal off them? Understand the disadvantages and advantages that they do. Is there something you can take that they do and build it into yours? If you're inventing an established market to grow with a business, unless the market is going faster than the people can supply it, people will have to stop buying a service from somebody else and buy it from you. Why will they do that? How will you give them the confidence to try your service or your product when they've been buying that same thing from somebody else? That's why you've seen a good example of the beds on TV. Try for 100 days. If you don't like it, give it back. That de-risks the purchase. And if I don't like it, I can go back to where I used to buy from anywhere before. So, understanding and being able to articulate to yourself why people will leave their existing provider to come to you is very important and will impact the way you market your services. And it's also to think about how will your competitors react to that. If they suddenly say, oh, we're losing a lot, because if they do a good business and people leave them, well, why have you got, oh, I've gone to, Sue's down the road, I'm buying from them now. Well, they might think, well, what can I do to get you back? So trying to anticipate the next step of your competitors is important. The next slide, please. Okay, we touched on this before, marketing and sales. How does the customer buy? Has that changed? So do you market to them? Classic, where do you market? If you're using social media, is it the right platform for where your customers congregate? So I sell B2B, so I pretty much use LinkedIn, and that's all I use. If your target market is teenagers, then you might be more on Snapchat, Instagram, those types of areas. So understanding where people buy and what is the format. Have an appropriate marketing budget. Most businesses would expect to spend between 5 and 10% of their turnover on marketing. A lot of small businesses, when they're starting out or trying to grow, think, oh, I'll economize, I keep my marketing small, and then wonder why they don't succeed. Marketing is a bit of a speculate to accumulate, but you need to be realistic. You need to have a decent budget. You can use it cleverly. PR may be appropriate. I use PR a lot for my business before I sold it, and it generated great returns for me. But to use PR, you got to have a good story. It can't just be I'm releasing product X. You've got to perhaps be a little bit controversial as well. The next slide, please. Okay, basics, operations. If I get an order, how am I going to fill it? Fulfill it? How do I provide the service, to provide the product? Who am I dependent on? If things go wrong, how am I going to handle that? If you sell how are my customers get in touch with me if there's a query? If you sell a product, what's the warranty, returns process? And with suppliers, it's also about understanding the risks. I was talking a couple of years ago, talking about a lady that made jam. Her differentiator was she used very specialized fruit, because I didn't realize there were so many brands of strawberries until I had that conversation. She used a particular one. I said, where'd you get it from? Apparently there was only one supplier in the UK that grew it, and she hadn't thought about the impact on her business if that supplier went out of business, had a fire, crop got damaged. She had no contingency plan if that. So she did go away and found that there were, Spain was where that variety was grown more. So she actually had some backup suppliers should you need them. So understanding the whole risk in the supply chain is important. Next slide, please. Which leads us into risk. What could possibly go wrong? Think about it, be hard about it, and then what if that did happen? What would you do? How would you mitigate that risk? Particularly if people are lending to you, they want to know you thought about the what could possibly go wrong question. The next slide, please. And then the key financials, profit loss balance sheet. If you've got past trends, that's great to show. And it's important to show assumptions. What are the key ones? And be prudent. Some people do here show best case, worst case. Particularly if they're looking for investment to assure the investors, well, even if it didn't go quite right, we're still going to generate sufficient funds to pay you off. And the next slide about cash flow is key. Wherever you're starting from a business, if you assume that you're at naught cash, because invariably you'll be investing in the business, which means you'll be burning cash more. You'll be spending more than is coming in. At some point, you start to get more coming in than is going out, and eventually you get back to where you originally started. So whoever said running a business was easy should look at this. And at that point thereafter, hopefully you make a profit. Profit is vanity. Cash is sanity, is a well-known thing. So doing a proper cash forecast will tell you what's the maximum amount of money I'm going to need to borrow, using my own personal savings, whatever, and at what point do I pay it all back. Mapping that and continuing to manage that is absolutely key to the success of any business. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier about measuring the performance. Having some KPIs, which are not just financial, they could be others, and I'll talk a few examples, are key. You don't need loads. If you've ever been on the cockpit of a plane, I was going to say jumbo jet, but they've stopped flying now. You'll see these massive dials. I think there was the joke in the airplane film, it just kept scrolling across for ages. I was fortunate enough to talk to a pilot, and I said, how do you fly a plane with all those dials? I struggle with a car and I've only got a couple. And he basically said, I use 5. As long as those 5 are okay, and I guess one of them was height, then I don't have to worry about it. If one of those starts to not look where it should be, I look at a bank of others for more information. And running a business is a bit like that. Having a few key indicators that you can use to tell you your business on track can help you understand when things are going offline a bit earlier. Next one, please. So here's some areas you could have them: finance, customer sat. My last business I own, we measured customer sat religiously, and I paid my operation staff bonuses depending on what the score was. So it actually tied into their performance. Measure the effectiveness of the marketing. How many hits you're getting on the website, how long are they staying? Measure suppliers. Basically, those you'll have different emphasis for depending on your type of business, but what are the key things that are critical to your business? You should have some metrics around it. And the next slide, please. And the final bit of any business plan is communicating it. We talked right earlier on about who are the recipients of this: banks, staff, customers. It's important to communicate what's in the plan, how you're performing against it. You know, that whole fear, uncertainty, and doubt FUD factor. People will make stories up if they're in a vacuum of information. And it's also important that you can manage expectations. People may be thinking, oh, great, we're back at work. Things are going to go great from now. You know, it is about, you know, telling people what's going on, feeding back how you're achieving. Again, particularly if it's banks or loans. I can remember a bank guy coming back saying to me, he said, when we have to, unfortunately, close businesses, the majority of them we could have saved if they'd talked to us earlier. They'd come to us when there was some early signs there are issues, we could have probably helped them get through it. By the time they came to us, it was just too late. So again, that's about managing expectations and talking to people. The next slide, please. So that communications plan, which should be part, you know, linked to your business plan, is who you're going to tell, how frequently, what's the method, is it the same for all the stakeholders you got, and how do you get some feedback from other people involved in the business, how things are going. And the next slide, please, which is the final one, which is some key messages I'd hope you take away from this. One is that the whole process of business planning, looking at how you grow your business, is not a one-off. It's continually ongoing. You know, every quarter, every 6 months, you're pulling out that business plan saying, well, does it still stack up? Have things changed? Do I need to adapt it? Do I need to reflect changing circumstances? Having those measurements of progress so I can see how I'm going. An accountant said to me, profit is great, but it's like driving with the rear view mirror. It tells you how you've done in the past. It's not an indicator to how things are going to be. Something like customer satisfaction is probably a better measure as to how things are going. And then finally, making sure stakeholders can understand the plan and their role in it. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I don't know if if Ed, how we manage, if there are any questions from that.
Well, if anybody would like to ask a question, please put your hands up. Is that one from Luke?
Ed, I think we'll take the slides down now, please.
Yeah.
And then we can see each other. Thank you very much, Dave. That was absolutely brilliant. I've heard this before, but it's just so, it really, for me, it's a very, very good lesson. Okay. Because everything changes. Oh,
it does, yeah. I mean, and we've seen that over the last 12 months.
Yes. Yes, and it's how we go forwards. Now, do we have any questions?
I didn't have a question, but then when Ed thought that I was, those were clappy hands, the ones that I put up.
You weren't doing like that.
It was a round of applause. It wasn't this. But in the moment of terror, when he asked if I had a question, I did think one up, just so I didn't have to say no. So I run a number of different size businesses, from big national ones to very small local ones. And I'm in the process of setting up a podcast, which is not really a business per se, but the principles behind it will be almost the same as running a business. It's the same plan that we're putting in place. Tell me if I'm being cheeky here, but do you use a sort of almost like a set pro forma business plan when creating a business plan, or do you do it from scratch each time? And
I mean, pretty much the headings that I went through would be the headings I would have for any business plan. I mean, You're talking about a podcast, right? Okay. So, you know, you say, well, so you've got your customers. Who's going to want to listen to this? Yeah. How am I going to make them aware of it? You know, is it a podcast to generate revenue, i.e. a subscription-based one, or is it to sell through other activities. So what's the purpose of it? How am I going to market? What's the cost of production? How am I going to get feedback? All the same basic questions apply to any business. Obviously, as I mentioned, the length of the business plan may vary. You've got a national business, well, that's probably going to be a lot longer, but I would still argue if you can't fit it on about 10 pages, you've overthought it. Something more simple, and that's not being derogatory about a podcast, might be a page and a half.
Yeah.
But you still got to ask yourself all those key questions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Yield it. So I saw your hand was up.
Yeah. So this is the bit that I've struggled with over the years, is the whole vision piece. Because I think, do you need that firm vision in order for all this to flow from it?
I think you go back to my Alice in Wonderland slide. If you have no vision, it's impossible to know what direction to follow. Now, that vision could be just setting yourself some challenges.
Right.
It could be, a lot of us do New Year's resolutions. Okay, admittedly, most of us don't keep them, but we have a New Year's resolution. That's a bit like a vision. So it could be, so a vision for business could be as simple as, I want to grow this business by 20% in a year. That is a vision. It could be, I want to, in 3 years' time, I want to have 5 offices. Well, maybe not in the current climate, but you know what I mean. It's that very overarching thing. It could be, doesn't have to be a financial on that one. It could be, and I know one hotel did this, I want to be the highest rated hotel in my town. Right? And obviously, lawyers have feedbacks on Trustpilot. So, you could go for that. Because what you're trying to then say, that is the most important thing for me. So in the case of the hotel, he said, by doing that, rather than financial metrics, it ensures we'll focus on the customer. So that was his idea behind having the best rated on Trustpilot. He said, because that will put all our focus and all our overarching ideas around serving the customer. If we serve the customer, the money will follow. That was his logic, but that was his vision, to be the best hotel in that town. But he could say it could be simple. If the metric is, we'll grow the business by 20%, then it's about, as you go through the business plan, then you start saying, well, hang on, if I do that, that's not contributing to that 20% growth, but that is. So it gives you something to evaluate what you're actually doing. Does that make sense? It's about
Okay, so it doesn't have to be too sexy, put it that way, because I think, everyone talks about having a story and all that kind of thing, it's, because obviously the vision is important for bringing on along the staff and making sure that they can see where we're going as well. I mean, that's,
and you can have some, what I call nicer, softer stuff, like, we want people to be happy, but I come back, unless you got something measurable, how will you know you got there? And let's face it, if you said, let's take that 20% growth one, if I'm then coming to you for a job and, well, what's my future with this company? Well, our aim is we will be 20% bigger this time next year. As a potential employer, I'm thinking, well, okay, if they're trying to grow by 20%, that probably gives me job security. It probably gives me the opportunity to grow with this company because there will be other vacancies. There might be the opportunity for promotions. You can tell your story around anything, but it's the problem is, if you just talk, my experience, if you just talk fluffy, i.e. with nothing quantifiable, people can't get that image in their head. Whereas the hotel example I gave you, again, the motivation was, we're going to be the best rated hotel on Trustpilot. That was aspirational and people would go to them there. But yes, it's, as I say, it could be, if you were in retail, and assuming retail, obviously they've got enough challenges, but it could be, yeah, we've got 2 shops today. We want 4 by the end of the year. We want 10 by that, or we're going to expand into France next year. But you see, it once you've got that, I'm heading broadly in that direction, then you can align all the activities behind it. If you don't have that, I'm heading roughly in that direction, how do you decide what you're going to do within the business?
Okay, maybe my ideas have been too big and have to kind of hone them in a bit more.
Well, again, obviously a business plan can cover more than 1 year. Yeah, it could cover 3 or so. Your big idea can be your 3 or your 5-year objective.
Yeah.
So how do you then break that down? Comes back to being measurable. What are those interim milestones that take me to that point?
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it's it's made it more concise for me. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, time is marching on, everyone.
Okay.
I would like to thank you very much, Dave. This has been excellent. And
my pleasure.
I'm going to give everyone a little wave to say, hope everyone has enjoyed it as well. Okay?
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much. See you later.
Bye. Going off.